Guys, welcome to Critical Thinkers Academy. This is Doug.
Hi, all.
I'm Michał, and this is the Critical Thinkers Academy without scenario. So, we'll do a quick intro to what critical thinking is. Doug, what is critical thinking?
Well,
5 minutes and we're done.
Sure. Easy peasy. Well, for me, I think critical thinking is ensuring that you process information in a way that best aligns with the reality of whatever it is you're trying to understand. So, for example, if I'm encountering something I've never seen or heard before, I'm taking the time to assess it. I'm taking the time to break down the smaller parts to make sure I understand everything that I'm hearing or witnessing. I'm comparing it to what I already know, and I'm not being hooked on any one specific thing. There's a lot of pitfalls in thinking that we sometimes encounter when we're going through the process of critical thinking, and some of those things can sometimes prevent us from seeing things for what they really are. So critical thinking kind of helps us overcome those hurdles, like bias, for example, and interpret the world around us in a way that's very rational and on point.
Okay. So I will share my side of the view. So I started this because of my kids. They, as every kid, I believe, they use a lot of social media, and they believe in many things. And what I wanted to achieve, what I wanted to convince them to, is to think about every message they hear. Is it really true? Is it valid? Is it confirmed? Can you check using other sources if what you heard is true? Because you can do you some harm, or you can simply tell or replicate some lies. So that is one of the reasons I started critical thinking, and right now it's something that stops me from being over emotional. You know, as a leader, I get a lot of meetings with our team members, with our employees, saying, "Oh, somebody did something wrong, and I should punish them," or something like this. You know,
Sure,
easy stuff. And usually, I trust people for 100% at the beginning. So then I said, "Okay, whatever you said, it must be true." Right now, it's like, okay, maybe let's have some data in front of us first, and then let's talk about how to judge it. So that's in essence one of the things that I consider as a critical thinking.
So gathering the facts, breaking it down into smaller pieces to make sure that every aspect that you're hearing or understanding aligns with the reality of the situation as closely as possible.
True, and getting a lot of perspectives. This is very important, because if you are in a bubble of your own, beliefs, then you might be judging something in a wrong way, really.
Sure, happens all the time. I think we're all guilty of that at some point, right?
That's true. Doug, maybe a question to you.
Sure.
When it comes to an example when you used it recently in a product company.
Product company, sure. Well, I think that a perfect example of that would be when we were looking at introducing a new feature to a project we were working on with regards to improving accessibility. So one of the questions that came up was like, do we really need to put this in here? Is this really valuable for the customer? And half the team was screaming, yeah, we need to include this. This is really important. Without it, the customer is going to have a far worse experience. So let's commit to the time and effort required to do it. So, at face value, hearing that, you can't really know for sure if that's the case. I mean, yes, you have to trust your team, but if half your team is saying yes and half your team is saying they're not really sure, then as a leader, I think it's important that you think a little bit more critically about it. You say, okay, Well, do you have any evidence to support that it's going to definitely bring added value to the customer? Do you have some data to support that customers have been requesting this feature? Like what exactly have you seen that makes you so convinced that this is why the customer, like this is where we should be putting our effort and this is what we need to be putting out? This is, for example, one thing. So then, of course, it gets boiled down even further, like, okay, show me this data. Why did you draw this conclusion? And why does the other half of the team draw a different conclusion from this data? Can you explain your point? You break it down, you listen to what they have to say, which is important as well. You need to have an open mind. I think that's an important part, but also be not afraid to scrutinize information as it comes through too. It's okay to ask questions. I think part of critical thinking is asking a lot of questions, but making sure you're asking the right questions too.
Yeah,
so
that's very important, asking the right questions, because whenever I do any kind of workshops, meetings with the critical thinkers or wannabe critical thinkers, they ask me, is 5 why enough? And I usually answer, no, it's not, because if you will ask 5 times why in a row, you will get the person on the other side really mad, really, because it's very aggressive question. So it must be rephrased. 5 why is not asking 5 times why in a row. It's about asking a precise question that will get you more information, more data.
Yeah.
But I have a question to what you just said a couple of seconds ago. What would have happened if you would implement something that is not desired by the market?
Well, several things. The first and most obvious one is waste of valuable, precious time and resources, of course. So there's an immediate negative effect, I think. But also, it's an opportunity to grow and make sure that we can learn something, right? So perhaps critical thinking can be applied when things to make sure that things go right, but also to build upon when things don't necessarily go as right as they should. So, for example, why did we act on this data when we didn't have enough information to support it? Or why were we so convinced of this being correct when it turned out it wasn't? What was the difference here? Why did we have that change or that inconsistency in result versus the data to support it? Where are we getting our data from, for example, might be a question. Like, you should be scrutinizing not only the data itself, but where you get the data from. So there are some sources you can trust. There are some maybe that you need to experiment with sometimes as well. But breaking down those smaller parts, like I was saying, or breaking things down into smaller parts rather, is where you're going to start to find the inconsistencies. Because sometimes you look at something at face value and it's not always evident or obvious. For example, like this was the best feature we could possibly include. We were so sure the customers wanted it, but then you do it and then nobody uses it. There's nothing to support it at all, even though your data, for example, we had like 200 customers write us asking to add this feature. We had heat maps showing that people were looking in this area for that specific button, but it wasn't there because it's everywhere else. There could be things like that, but when it comes time to actually implement it and it has the exact opposite effect, you have to say, okay, what made that happen? Like, why was it that way? If we had this data to support it, there's something missing here, and critical thinking will help you get to the bottom of that.
So I have 2 more questions to that.
Sure.
And that's also critical thinking. It's active listening.
Absolutely.
And going, deep diving into what you heard to understand a little bit more. So is failure an option in critical thinking?
Well, I think failure is always, unfortunately, an option in anything in life. But when it comes to critical thinking, there's always a risk. There's a risk that you don't get enough information, you misinterpret the information. But the whole point, I think, of critical thinking is to try to avoid or mitigate that risk of failure.
Okay.
But it can always be there.
I hope so.
Of course.
Yeah,
If we don't fail, we're not learning, right?
that's true. That's true. Experimenting is something that is very much required in normal life and in a product company or anywhere really.
Absolutely.
And maybe one last question: how do you handle emotions being a critical thinker?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, sometimes, you know, we're dealing with external factors when we're trying to deal with critical thinking. Like, for example, maybe you've just sat through 3 or 4 very difficult meetings. You know, you had to really apply yourself. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of information to take on board. You're tired, right? You're tired because you haven't had a break in between. Maybe it's possible. It could happen. And then you're sitting down and you have to assess something that requires a lot of critical thinking. You might try to skip certain steps because you want to hurry and get to a conclusion. Or maybe you have anchor bias, which is you compare all the information you receive to the first piece of information that you receive. You know, this is, for example, like, oh, the red color came first, so I'm comparing all the other colors to the red color to see how they match against the red color. But you're limiting yourself when you do that. Just colors as a random example. Because maybe blue would be better, actually. Maybe yellow would be a better color to base all the other ones off of. But you won't know that because you've already kind of gone through anchor bias in keeping with the red theme, for example. So again, that open-mindedness is going to be critical. And of course, scrutinizing everything that comes across as information. So somebody might say, well, why aren't we going for purple? Why aren't we going for green? So, well, maybe we could go with those colors, but why? Again, like you said, the why. So let me ask you a question, if I may.
Please.
Yeah. When you have no right answer, how do you apply critical thinking to make a decision?
If I have no right answer, well, first of all, I have to dig for data. I need to have a strong foundation based on data and opinions. Obviously, opinions on the data. And sometimes you can take a very precise decision that will provide you an answer. This is the way. And sometimes it's a situation where you have to trust your experience, or you have to take a risk. Risk is also allowed. Risk is an option. Failure is an option. But through critical thinking, we want to minimize the risk or minimize the failure to a minimum. So that's how I would approach it. Usually, especially in our business, there is not enough time to spend as much time as you need to take the very precise decision, because it's a very fast world where decisions must be taken pretty quickly. So what I do really is I'm trying to surround myself with data and basically take the well-educated guess on the data I'm getting.
I like to take it even one step further than that. Make sure that I'm surrounding myself with the best people possible.
Oh, obviously. People equals or diverse set of opinions from a diverse team that is not built to one equation. So everybody is equal. Everybody is the same attitude. I like to work with people that have different opinions.
Absolutely.
As long as they keep it to the a normal, intelligent level.
Yeah, keep it from going too wild.
Yeah.
So here, that leads to an interesting question for you again, for me. How do you determine a good opinion versus maybe a less good opinion?
So,
with critical thinking, of course.
Yeah. So first thing I try to spot is how much emotions are in the answer. And it's okay. Emotions are good. The thing that I try to probe is that if I'm asking the person that is providing me the information, if they can split the emotion from the set of data by asking the right questions. So an example, okay, I feel that you're very passionate about it, but if you would have to spend your salary on it, what is the main factor you would take into consideration to invest in it?
Sure.
And if the person is able to, okay, I'm passionate, but I'm putting this aside, and this is what I would use to make a decision, then I know that the opinion is valuable.
Yeah.
And usually there is no one answer, one opinion that makes the whole thinking process solved.
Sure.
So this is how I test it.
Excellent. Okay. Do you think that, okay, so when you're applying critical thinking to a situation like that and you receive pushback from the person who maybe you might not think has the right approach to the problem, how do you show them, using critical thinking, your reasoning, and how would you display it to them? Would you simply show them the evidence that you've got? Talk to me about bringing people on board with your idea through critical thinking, because it's one thing to convince yourself, but how do you apply it to a group of people, like your team, for example?
So when the idea is proposed, I always try to, first of all, understand what is the motivation behind the idea from the person that is delivering it. And if I'm hearing a pushback, as long as the pushback is built on facts, not emotions, is that I don't like it, I've been doing this for the last 25 years, so my idea is the best, I still push for some proofs, evidence. If this is the good idea, how do you know? If you say we have a poor code quality, how do you know? Because I see it. Okay, but that's your opinion. Can you show me something that justifies that? Yeah. If not, then I usually say, okay, so let's maybe try to phrase several questions we need to ask to each other, because that's the teamwork. Yeah. Critical thinking is teamwork, not like you need to think critically and I will take the decisions. It's not working like that. Of course. Yeah. So I'm trying to work as a team. So let's define the questions we will ask to get a little bit deeper into your concerns, because you're pushing back, you have concerns. Let's prove it, because I will not push forward my idea because you might be right, but we need to have a proof for that. So openness to the possibility of new ideas, but also scrutinizing the data as it comes through to you. Yeah, because critical thinking is not about getting the right answer. Sometimes you will not get the answer, or an answer you will not like. That's possible too. And that's the openness that you need to be ready for. Yeah. So how do we deal with, so what would you say is the difference between critical thinking and creative thinking? Oh, those are two different processes. Yeah. They can overlap. They can be done one after another. They can switch. Still, the creative thinking is where you are not judging the ideas, not measuring the ideas. Okay. Everyone can speak. It's almost like brainstorming. Sure. Where you bring up the ideas, when you discuss, try to evolve them, paint them. At the end of the process, you might pick several ones that you feel those are the best. But critical thinking is, okay, we have the ideas. Now there is time to bring the data and bring the very harsh, difficult questions to the table to decide which of those ideas should we invest in, whatever the investment is. One of the hints that I always give is that try to imagine, or I'm just bringing a couple of dollars on the table. Just imagine that's your salary. So you have to be very precise in deciding which of the ideas you will pick, because this is your salary you will pay for to invest.
So creative thinking, you would say, is perhaps like the icebreaker to solving a problem, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, and then whereas critical thinking is deciding which of those ideas is going to lead to your success.
That's true, because critical thinking should bring you to the best answer.
Sure.
Not objective, but not subjective, but objective.
Objective,
Yeah.
sure, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, because ultimately, when we're applying critical thinking in a product environment, it's about solving problems or improving something, right?
That's true. Yeah.
So
yeah, critical thinking is helpful in a lot of areas. Problem solving, root cause analysis,
Yep.
facilitation, or
added value.
Added value. Those are the areas where you have to lead the discussion in a calm, precise, step-by-step way to achieve what you want to achieve at the end.
Do you think that there's room for many different ways to apply critical thinking within a team? Or is there one set model that everybody kind of has to follow? I think there's certainly truths that have to be present in order for critical thinking to really be functional. But do you think there's room for interpretation and how it should be employed, you could say?
There is.
Okay.
There is room for interpretation. So I did some math within last 4 or 5 years when the Critical Thinkers Academy exists. I delivered about 500 trainings and workshops for about 500 people.
Wow.
And what I really provide is the general approach method to how to think, because obviously you could apply all the critical thinking rules, but then you would become more of a philosopher than a businessman. This
is something you have to be very careful of. It's a pitfall along the way, right?
That's the thing. So we should use it having some respect to some areas, like give yourself time, be thoughtful, take the decisions when you are cold-minded, not hot-head, after some kind of an argument or a heated discussion.
Or under pressure, for that matter.
Yeah, or under pressure. Well, obviously, critical thinking is not about every situation, because if your water pipe is broken in your bathroom, this is not the time to do
pause and think.
Yeah, just sit down. Or what should we do about that? Let's have a discussion.
Should I tape it, or should I?
Yeah. Let's write it down. So it's not the case. So critical thinking is about remembering about some elements that you have to take into consideration: time, temper, emotions, biases, logical fallacies, etc. And if you remember some of them, your decisions are already much better.
I think you've touched on a really interesting point that perhaps we haven't spoken about yet, which is critical thinking doesn't necessarily mean a slow process, right? Sometimes you can apply critical thinking in a high-speed environment. So like you used the example of a burst pipe in your house, like in your bathroom, for example. So you know that you have a problem. You need to solve it immediately. So the fact is that water is gushing out of your pipe. It's spilling everywhere. It's it's making a big mess. So you know you have to stop the water. You, for example, are going to immediately probably think of a couple things, like, oh, I need to try and block the water immediately where it's coming out, or maybe I need to go shut off a valve somewhere underneath the sink, for example, or somewhere else in the house.
True. So if you have a broken water pipe, critical thinking is still an option, because you can cover the water with your hands so that it will not flood some electronics in the bathroom.
Or jam a cloth in there.
Or jam a cloth, something like this. But then you can close the valve, and that's much more efficient solution. It's about also efficiency of the solutions.
So that's an important point, I think, as well, that critical thinking doesn't mean a slow bureaucratic process of evaluation.
No.
Sometimes it also means being extremely efficient, right?
True. It's about taking time to listen
Mm-hmm.
to the other person.
Yeah.
And that is why we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth, to listen more than talk.
Yeah.
And if you are listening, taking time to understand the situation, it's very likely that you'll take a better decision.
That's a fair point.
And at this point, I would say this is what we wanted to cover in this.
Yeah, I think we covered what we wanted to really talk about today.
Introducing critical thinking, at least to some point. There will be many more.
Yeah.
We would like to record with Doug and
Absolutely.
Alicia and with Rafał. So if you liked it, look out for another one. You don't have to subscribe. It's not a YouTube or TikTok event. You don't have to subscribe. But if you liked it, just look for more. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
See you later.
Is it on?
Hi, this is.
Hi, Idol.
Should I?
Hi.
Hi, Mom.
Okay.